No. And also, I probably should mention everybody else that was in that workshop, but I only know that Sean listens. So, hello again, Sean. Anyway, Hello and welcome to episode 135 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is for marketing and the F is for, well, you decide. As you're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm no rockstar, but I've picked up a thing or two over the last 20 years on my tour from sysadmin to CMO, and each week I chat to the true rockstars, my fabulous guests and chums, and share with you some marketing street knowledge that hopefully will inspire your inner rockstar. Come say hello. We are Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn, and proud members of the Marketing Podcast Network. This episode was recorded on Friday, the 7th of October, 2022. Hope you've had a good week and you are well, safe and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. On this week's episode in the Marketing Studio, I have a fascinating chat with Jeff Clark about anthropology and marketing. I go backstage with former guest and my old boss, Grant Johnson, the CMO at Emburse. And we wind down the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar for a cocktail and a thought with Robert Rose. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back
After this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the boys' club of advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
On to our first segment, the Marketing Studio with Jeff Clark, our resident rockstar, strategy advisor and former Forrester Serious Decisions Research Director. And this week, he's inspired by a webinar. Welcome, Jeff, to the Rockstar CMO Studio with Jeff Clark. I've done it again, haven't I?
Yeah, really. Sounds a bit redundant, but hey, what the hell? As long as you spell the name right in the notes, show notes, that's fine.
Exactly. And all the links and all that good stuff, Jeff. And say nice things about you as well. I think that's what I'm here for. Yeah, no, I try. So this week, we are going to be talking about storytelling, one of our effing marketing fundamentals. And I understand that you've been inspired by a webinar called The Hidden Meanings Shaping Consumer Interest in Sustainability by anthropologist, and I'm going to get this completely wrong, even though we rehearsed it already, Ashval Arkagud. I think I got that right.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, luckily I don't think he's a listener. So EVP and Group Director, you're friends at Lux Research. I know you know a few of the folks over there. And worth people having a look at what Lux Research are doing, isn't it, if they're interested in sustainability, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly, I mean, they're an advisory firm, and their focus is broader than sustainability. But I went to a little conference that they held, and then have sort of like, whether it's on LinkedIn or otherwise, I see these little blurbs pop up, and so my interest in renewable energy, sustainability, et cetera. I see a certain set of their stuff, but they do a pretty broad range of topics that they do advisory on.
Yeah, maybe we should have one of them on the show one time. Anyway, so that's Lux Research. And so, as I was mentioning, we talk about good storytelling and connection with our buyers and our effing marketing fundamentals. And Ashval, I've got that right again, that's amazing,
yes,
refers to sustainability in that webinar. But you believe it's something we can all learn from. So how can anthropology help us? What say you, Jeff?
Well, I am. I don't know. I'm always intrigued when there's something that comes in from an area of study that you would think has nothing to do with whatever, whether it's marketing or other areas, and it's like, oh wow, this is really interesting. But we certainly know. At least I believe and most of our listeners would know that it's like, as much as we like to think of ourselves as rational beings, and we make rational decisions, and, when particularly we're in business to business, we got to gather our facts. And we have to, do our due diligence and make a rational choice. That really, there's lots of other things at play in our brains that help us make those decisions.
Right. And I understand that one of the topics that came through from that webinar was about real trends and fads and how anthropology can help separate those. Was that? Yep. I mean, that seems to be something that came through, right? Yeah.
And so, I mean, he particularly focused on sustainable products, or sort of like in sort of the broad category of products that are trying to market themselves, or I shouldn't say trying to, but are marketing themselves as being sustainable. And so what he does is he kind of digs into the there's a little play of different words that mean somewhat the same thing. So implicit meanings, beliefs, sometimes he calls them micro trends. Because people will associate certain things with, in this case, sustainable solutions that help them either drive to purchase it, or they're willing to pay the premium. I'm willing to pay the extra money for that Tesla because it is giving me a feeling or satisfying a particular belief I have that that I'm doing something good for the world. But there's other things that are behind their purchase decision other than I'm just doing something good for the world.
Right. And I need to say hello to one of my colleagues now, Sean, who was in a branding workshop I did this week, because we were talking a lot about feelings, and I think that's what's coming through, isn't it, from this anthropological work is. And so when you say, I mean, just to drill a little bit into that question, the real trends from fads, are you saying that real trends are driven by these deeper feelings that people have, and fads that kind of come and go? I mean, they have kind of this
what their term is an iceberg model of meaning. And so there's this element of logical decision making, features, functions, or, I'm trying to get something accomplished, so therefore I'm looking for something to help me accomplish that. And then below that, and if you think about the iceberg, it gets wider and wider as you go further down. It's like there's a set of core beliefs. So there's some things that the buyer, believes that are more, they exist for a longer period of time. And then there are things below that are more transient. So they call that current manifestations. And so when you take, like in the case that he was going really, sustainability, and then you talk about, well, what are some of those belief systems, and now can we look at what are those beliefs that are have a long-term lifespan, and what could be fleeting, because what could changes in culture, what could changes in economics all of a sudden make something that, like if all of a sudden, healthier lifestyle or cultural authenticity was something you think is going to connect with you. I mean, something might, click in the market, and all of a sudden, okay, that I'm going to put that aside, and I'm going to actually focus on something else. Obviously, if we're all going to Armageddon, there'll be things that are more important than cultural authenticity.
And I
go ahead.
need to interrupt a second there, because we're really not laughing at the prospect of Armageddon.
Oh, no, we're not. Sorry.
I suddenly became conscious last week that we were talking about Hurricane Ian being named after me, and I was laughing my head off while Florida was being flattened. So I need to apologize to any listeners in Florida that felt that was insensitive. But just as a serious note. And also, I probably should mention everybody else that was in that workshop, but I only know that Sean listens. So hello again, Sean. Anyway, so this works really about because we in B2B, we're always talking about features and functions. So what you're talking about here is the meaning for somebody of that, right? And the feelings that they ascribe to that meaning. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. And so if you look at your buyer and the various personas in B2B, the various personas that are part of your buying, audience out there, and you'd say, so what are the things that are, the beliefs that they may have that are going to cause them to purchase products or services? And so in the case of sustainability, he talks about, escaping consumerism, cultural authenticity, healthier lifestyles, social status. I'm doing things that are good, so therefore I have status. Also staying technologically relevant. And so you can, if you're selling something that again is either new and is trying to crack into a market, or you're selling something that has a premium and you're trying to get people to basically justify that premium, you dig into these belief systems. You understand what's more mature than others, because again, some of these may be fleeting. And then as you design your product, because this is kind of a whole product view, you design your product, you design your go-to-market, you design the way you talk about it, the storytelling, to basically communicate to those. And so, and in anyone who gets a chance to listen to the pre-recorded or the webcast, they'll say he goes through a bunch of examples. Like Tesla is certainly there's an element of healthy lifestyle, but there's also a real element of social status and staying technologically relevant. So here's the new car that's coming out. Oh, and it gives me status. He also talks about Stella McCartney. So we're in rock and roll. She's Paul McCartney's daughter, and she's got this fashion line all together now, and it's both appealing to status, high-end luxury, but also healthier lifestyle, because the sourcing of all the materials is sustainable, low footprint, yada yada yada. So it's like I'm buying something that's at a premium, but I can feel good about it because of the way the products are being made.
I like that, and particularly those examples that you were sharing there about escaping consumerism, cultural authenticity. All those are what the brand says about you as the buyer, right? So you're overlaying your own feelings about yourself on of what this brand says about you, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. And so that's
and I was just going to say, and the important thing is to realize that as you dig deeper into some of these belief systems, is that you really need to. This is where market research and doing your investigation as to why are people buying, and I started I took some examples and I started trying to dig into why people are buying certain products, and it's like you really got to dig, because some of the analysts or whatever, or the industry magnates, influencers may understand this, and it may not be so clear. You may need to do a little bit of your own research, which is what the fellows at Lux Research were doing, is that they were taking these individual belief systems, interviewing people, and seeing where on a maturity curve things are before they can reach either mainstream awareness or the full adoption of the products. So once the products are adopted as in the mainstream, it's like you don't have to worry as much about these these things, because they become part of everybody's life.
Right. So we were talking about that last week, weren't we? The Gartner,
the hype cycle.
Hype cycle, absolutely. So it seems to me, and also there's that adoption model, isn't there, of early adopters, the main, and so it's interesting, these concepts coming together, doesn't it? We often talk about branding, and we talk about the feelings that the brand creates and the things the brand says about the buyer, but also, interestingly, it might be different things in the different stages of the hype cycle, or the different stages of their adoption. Is that
I think as something comes in as a totally new idea, and if you think about the hype cycle, and so as people are communicating about it and it's gaining traction, and everyone's talking about it, from the analysts to the buyers, it goes up that hype cycle. But then if some things do not pan out, and this is where being honest and of course, in the case of sustainability, not being greenwashing, being honest about what the product delivers and how you're communicating it, is that you don't want to fall into the trough of just disillusionment, because either some of these beliefs may be more fleeting and or all of a sudden not relevant, or you just haven't been able to get that adoption above that 5, 10, 15% of the market, so that it's got a long-term trajectory. Right. And so is this, Tesla seems to get used as an example for just about any avant-garde marketing or product innovation example. But you talked about Stella McCartney's fashion brand.
Is it more of a B2B thing, do you think, about brand connectivity, or do you think it's just as relevant for us in B2B that people need to have these feelings for us?
I mean, I think it is. There's a clear connection in consumer products, but I think that it's definitely relevant for for any type of new product and service. And of course, the complication is in B2B. Typically, there's more than one person making the purchasing decision. So you think about, there's the marketer, and then there might be the marketer's boss, the CMO, and then there might be the guy in sales and the guy in IT or whatever. And so it's figuring that out for each persona to at least to a level of which you can action upon it, and it makes sense is kind of necessary. But this is part of building your personas. Who is your persona? What are their triggers? What are their pain points? What so let's add to that. What are their kind of beliefs in terms of what they're trying to do? So I was thinking through, because I think it was just 2 weeks ago, we were talking about customer data platforms, and it's like, well, could we actually think about what are some of the implicit meanings that are that would, as me as a marketer, say a customer data platform would be of interest, and obviously, 3+ years ago it was new, so now it is not as new. It is gained a certain level of maturity, but if I think back, to again 3 or 4 years ago, it's like, there was certainly an element of staying technologically relevant. So some of the things that we talked about sustainability, they apply here. Gaining peer status, and then things that I think marketers have been striving for much longer. Delivering insights, to the business, delivering a total customer experience to the customer, becoming a partner with sales. I mean, I think these are all implicit meanings that we need to talk to and think about. Well, what does that? What's this mean in terms of this product and service? What does that mean for the marketer? What are they thinking? Yeah,
I just want to rewind a bit on that persona thing, because I think it's really interesting. Because when I'm approaching personas, we probably did some back in the day together when we were working in the same team, but the way that I've refined that particular part of what I do is I'm incredibly focused on needs, right? So I'll build personas based on needs, and I won't worry too much about job title or role or anything like that. And then I find that I have much fewer personas, because we're not trying to create all these different personas based on job title, industry, and all that kind of stuff. And because I'm usually taking the content marketing approach, so I'm thinking about the content we need to produce, because I can't control who consumes it, right? So I need to build some content for the people that have needs because they're risk averse. But what I think is interesting here is you're talking about not needs as much, but also about feelings, right? And their feeling toward your category. Is that the sort of thing we need to try and capture in these personas? How do they feel about this kind of purchase or this category? Or
I think if you think back to which is, it's always hard when you're trying to describe a model that has more like a 3-dimensional or a 2-dimensional view of it, and it's like, so if you think back to that iceberg model, the needs are initially expressed as that logical, they have problem. They have to solve a problem, and they're typically going to solve it a certain way. And then you get down to the core beliefs, which is, okay, the person who's going to try to solve that problem. So let's say the champion there's things that they want to accomplish within their organization, or things that they want to accomplish that are just like, that are more core to making them feel good about the job they're doing. And then there's the current manifestation of those beliefs, which is, I could use. So if a core belief is I wanted to provide, a single view of the customer to an organization, I did try to attempt to do that 10, 12 years ago, before customer data platforms existed. And then, so what's the current manifestation of that relative to that belief? And how mature is that? Is that something that we trying to sell this product can actually deliver to the customer? So therefore, we could own that that single view of the customer to the organization. And so as I think through some of these implicit means relating to like the CDP example, it's like again, there are things we were trying to solve, and so now here's the next generation of tools. And so if I'm really trying to stay relevant, then maybe I need to hop on this, because otherwise I'm going to be left trying to solve it in the old way. And and if gaining status is important to me, and I remember when I was at Pegasystems, and a lot of the way we were selling to the champions for our products was that you get a chance to speak at the conference, you get a chance we will help make you a leader in your market because you're the person who was so successful in doing this. So there's ways, again, this is like just digging down to that next level to saying, how are we going to appeal and talk to people about these, giving meaning to the way they're solving their problem with their needs.
Yeah, so we're really going beyond the needs of the persona, that logical step that you said was at the tip of the iceberg, but really thinking about how we can help them in a deeper way with some of their other motivations that may be outside of what our product or service does.
Well, and if you think about it from a whole product perspective, how are they going to feel once they've they bought it, they implement it, they're using it, so how are they going to feel about this, and is it actually satisfying these deeper needs in addition to just I sold them product A and they plugged it in a stack, and now they're off and running. And
that's brilliant. I love that idea, and I would encourage people to go listen to this webinar. It's called The Hidden Meanings: Shaping Consumer Interest in Sustainability. It's by anthropologist Ashval Arkagood, who's the EVP and Group Director at Lux Research, and we'll include a link to it on YouTube. So we believe you can probably find it on YouTube if you're looking for it. And we have one final agenda item. Jeff, what song are we going to play out with today?
We're going to play out on the song Fashion by David Bowie back in 1980, because Mr. Bowie was sort of stepping back and sort of taking a look at the fashion world. And there's a line in it. There's a new brand talk. There's a brand new talk, but it's not very clear, which makes me think, you need to be clear and relevant when you're talking to your customers about the products you're selling them and the way they're going to feel once they purchase them.
That's brilliant. Yeah, there was no argument for me on this song this week.
I'll give a shout out to the new Bowie movie, Moonage Daydream, which I thought was excellent, and also helped remind me of that body of work when I was looking for a song.
Yeah, I also noticed that we didn't bother with the weather this week, and I'm assuming
it's very nice here.
Is it? Oh, it's quite nice here as well. Oh, jolly good. All right then, and so I'll play out with Fashion by David Bowie from 1980. And will I return and find you in the Jeff Clark Master Studio next week?
Meet you back in the studio.
Cheers, buddy. I'll see you then.
You dance, but I don't know its name. The people from bad home do again and again. It's big and it's bland, full of tension and fear. They do it over there, but we don't do it here. Fashion, turn to left. Fashion, turn left. Fashion. We are the Goon Squad and we're coming to town.
Thank you, Jeff. A classic tune there with Fashion by David Bowie from 1980, and a fascinating topic. I'll include a link to that webinar by Lux Research that we referred to in the show notes, plus all of Jeff's links. And if you have any thoughts or comments, you can contact Jeff through our website at rockstarcmo.com. Right, time to go backstage, or rather backstage, as it's the second appearance for Grant Johnson, who is a serial CMO, currently the CMO at Emburse. He's held the top marketing job in a string of B2B companies, including Kofax, Pegasystems, SDL, and Farnet. and for his sins, Grant is a former boss of mine and gave me my first opportunity to develop this crazy idea I had for creating a content marketing function over a decade ago. A generous boss, and as you'll hear, he's taking that generosity to mentoring. Great to catch up with Grant. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hi Grant, welcome back to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I'm doing great. Nice to talk with you again, Ian.
Yeah, no, great to speak to you again as well. And you're a former boss of mine and mentor, so I'm always delighted to speak to you. And we had you back on the show in episode 32, so that's, 103 episodes ago. So while I do have some regular listeners who have been around a while, but for those that haven't listened to all 135 episodes, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, first, congratulations. That's a milestone, crossing 100 episodes. You've got something going. I'm a lifelong learner. That's why I chose marketing as a career, and I've been a CMO multiple times, both at public and privately held companies since 2009. And what's been interesting, I've been part of either acquiring or merging with 20 companies. And I've also been acquired 7 times. Wow. I don't know if that's the lucky number. So I've seen a few things, right? I've developed both best practices to share and landmines to avoid.
Yes, yeah. And the nice thing is right now is you're sharing that with the world with your new projects, which we'll come on to in a moment. But you're currently the CMO at Emburse. What did Emburse do?
Well, Emburse was brought together 7 companies in spend space. And so we became the first company to deliver a spend optimization platform. And some call it spend management. We call it spend optimization. We manage all aspects of what is known as indirect spend. So you go places these days post-COVID, so travel and expense, right? Yeah. Any expenses. Invoices, you have to pay vendors, sometimes known as AP automation, accounts payable. And then payments, cards to just purchase anything, SaaS subscriptions, stuff for remote work, get-togethers with your team. And we have this great mission to humanize work, which I find very inspiring. And what we're all about is eliminating the mundane manual work that takes you away from what matters most. So more important work that actually moves the ball forward, or more time with your family or your community.
Right. Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah, and who doesn't want more time with their family? I love that. So the reason that I just mentioned just a moment ago, the reason why I want to have you back on the show, aside from it's always a joy to chat to you, Grant, was you've started mentoring CMOs, and you've got a new project called CMO Mentor, which is cmomentor.com, which is a great read so far. And how's that going?
Well, it's going great. As I said, my 4th tour of duty here as a CMO, and I thought it'd be great to start sharing some of my lessons learned and, invite input. I do mentor some what I would call early career CMOs, so I thought I'd put some of the ideas into more formal blog posts.
Yeah. And it's a great read. And one of the ones I picked out that I wanted to ask you about today is you've listed 5 C's for modern CMOs. And any regular listener to our show knows that we love a list. You're also the former boss of Jeff Clark, who's also a regular on this show. And Jeff and I love a list. And so tell us about those 5 C's for modern CMOs.
That's great. We love lists. We love alliteration.
Yeah.
And, I was contemplating. There's another C for you. And these are crazy times. First of all, you get COVID, and the only constant is change. Another C for you. And then, now we've got the constrained economy. Are we in a recession? We all feel pain, so it must be something. So how can a marketer maximize their input in this challenging economy? So I came up with these 5 C's for maximum impact. And the first one was born out of COVID. Like, I started thinking about, gosh, we're not going to offices anymore.
Yeah.
And we, as chief market officers, I always sort of think of myself as chief growth orchestrator, chief, orchestrator anyway. And so how can I help the chief people officer and the rest of the executive leadership team engage? We're trying to hire people, trying to retain people. So culture was really key. You got to foster, obviously it starts with our vision for us to humanize work and our values. And so I helped come up with our values. Our values are another one of these mnemonics. It's called See It. sincerity, empathy, empowerment, individuality, and teamwork. And so we try to, get this embedded in how we work, how we treat each other, what we hold, sacrosanct. And so culture, it's shaping the marketing team and shaping the broader organization. It's how we engage and retain. And so I just felt that was a good C to start with.
So, and that's the culture, as you're saying. I mean, it's not that sort of brand purpose bollocks, is it? It's actually the culture within your team, within your organization, how you recruit and retain staff is what you're referring to there in terms of the CMO's role, in terms of the company culture, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and how we engage with each other, we're transparent, there's no agendas. These are all what's accepted behavior. I've been at companies, and I won't mention them, where it's accepted behavior not to treat everybody with respect. To me, that's unacceptable, right? And so that's why sincerity and respect are
cool. And so the first C is culture. What's the second C?
Coaching. And of course, that's sort of inspired by what I love to do.
Yeah.
And I, it's funny. I hear about people trying to come up with a purpose. Mine just popped into my head a couple decades ago, which was to move others to action. And so that's partly why I'm in marketing. I can motivate prospects and customers. I can, persuade others, and I can also motivate staff. And so coaching is, you've got to give people the direction. You just can't set high expectations. I've heard that one before. I think that's a cop-out. Well, I want you 100X is good. I want 200X. But you've got to empower people. You have to inspire them. You have to course correct them. Like, hey, this isn't working.
Yeah.
And, so I think coaching is really essential for successful CMOs. And it doesn't just start with your direct reports. I've got 8 direct reports, about, 50 some folks here at Emburse. And so I talk to my directors, like, how are you coaching your staff? How are you helping them reach their career path and desired, right? And so it's got to go, coaching has to go throughout all levels of the organization.
Yeah. And I think if you're at the top of that sort of pyramid as the CMO, if you need to encourage that culture and give people permission to invest time and resources in developing their team, right? And you asking that question of your team then gives them permission to go do that, right?
Well, exactly. And it's not like, the annual review. I mean, some companies do twice a year, but it's like you should be coaching all the time. Those are coachable moments, right? So take advantage of those.
Yeah. Cool. So first is culture, second is coaching, and your third is?
It's campaigns. I mean, a lot of times marketers is sort of a black art in some cases. You're judged by how you contribute to pipeline, which of course is important. But in order to build pipeline and to build the category and to, build differentiation, you have to have campaigns that I've always felt you should build brand and generate demand together. I was once at a company where the CEO said, here's another $1 million. And I could have spent it just on your brand awareness. But I figured if I could do brand awareness and increase the pipeline, my sales counterpart, the CRO, would like me too. Right. So campaigns, what I find is, and when I came to Emburse, there was like 4 sources of any significant leads. We've got a dozen. I don't know what the magic number is. Is it 5? Is it 50? But certainly 4 wasn't it. And so want to have enough types of lead sources. Sometimes things will wax and wane. They work really well, and then you get diminishing returns. And also, campaigns that really have clarity. I learned after probably spending $1 billion, with 8 and so forth, that, if you're relevant, it's like the most important thing. Being distinct is good, but you've got to resonate with, customers don't want to buy your products. They want to solve their problems, right? So campaigns that have clear, compelling value propositions that break through. And then ultimately, if you deliver business value that the customer can measure, not you, that they can measure, then you're going to win.
Yeah. And I think there's some straight talking right there. I mean, the fact that you're saying that campaigns is that third C of yours, there's no, getting around the fact that we're here to build revenue, right? And I also like the fact that you're talking about building brand and generate demand together, because obviously a great brand is a demand multiplier, right? In that anything you do in marketing is supported by having a great brand if you're doing PPC or any activity, right? So I think it's really good that you've got that going together as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I just think that it lifts the tide, having the awareness and also the particular affinity towards that brand. We work a lot here on our customers. Again, there are a lot of C's out there, and become advocates, right? And they have to identify and our attributes, what we stand for, approachable, friendly, caring, those types of things. We have to live that. So you're right. Brands, it's got to be, sort of infuse itself within your campaigns.
Right. So we've done culture, we've done coaching, we've done campaigns. What's your fourth C?
Well, category. I mean, I started thinking about this back, and you and I remember the Gartner days. You want to be in the Magic Quadrant. What the hell are you going to do if you don't have a Magic Quadrant? Well, we're in a multi-billion-dollar market. There is no MQ.
Right.
There's escapes. There's other ways to track our markets. I thought, well, let's try to evolve the category. And I started thinking about it. I arrived at Emburse about 3 years ago, so I'm, ways into this journey here. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, there's a competitor that owns this, has a pretty strong stake around spend management. And we had built some incredible insights to our analytics. And it felt like anybody can just spend, but and anybody can manage spend, but how do you optimize spend? It became more important as, companies were disrupted by COVID and now supply chain, in recession and whatever. And so what we pivoted towards is spend optimization. It's really differentiated with our analytics and insights. Mm-hmm. And, we help customers optimize spend. And by doing so, they increase their financial resilience. I mean, every CFO loses sleep over how much they spend and do they have visibility into spend and can they pay vendors on time and collect, invoices on time. And so we do all that. And I think the category is so important for a marketer because if you're just part of the category, you're not shaping it or reshaping it. And, you can get pushed aside or asunder and not have control. We get a little more control over the dialogue by coming up with our own particular spin on the category.
Yeah, there's that book, isn't there, Play Bigger, which is really about how you need to be the leader in your category. Where do you sit when it comes to category about, it always seems to me that vendors in collusion with analysts are always trying to create new categories and new niches. Is that the advice you give to CMOs if they can't redefine the category they're in, create a new one, or where are you on that one?
Yeah, that's I think probably an ongoing debate. I've read Play Bigger, and you're right. It's got some good ideas on that, and I also think building, a following is really critical to your brand. In my early days, we had incredible brand affinity. I ran Norton Worldwide for Symantec, and we had higher affinity than Microsoft at the time, anyway. Wow. And so I think, and just you have to have enthusiastic followers, and around your point of view, and but you can't expect to win overnight. We track our brand at Emburse. I have 12 objective metrics to track brand momentum, and it's something we can do internally with we obviously use external sources, but we report only internally. And, there are all these different dimensions from, customer satisfaction to, web visits to followers. And so I think you just have to work all those things, and you try to build the category. And it's great if there's an actual category you can either fit in. Yeah. I've mostly been with disruptive challenger brands, and that's fine. If you're the big dog, you can only go down, right? So, hold on to number one spot, but I think it's more fun to be a disruptor.
Yeah, no, I agree. So that's great. So we've got the culture, we've got the coaching, we've got the campaigns, we've got the category that we're in, and we're defining that and we're leading that. And what's our fifth C?
Well, it's courage. It could be consistency, it could be a lot of different C's. But to me, and I learned this, and when you've been a CMO a number of times, and hopefully if you're self-reflective, it's like, I would have liked to have had taken more risk and had more courage. I've been asked before, what would you do differently, right? But I think the other reason I think courage is important, you've got to have the will and the skill, of course, but you also have the fortitude and the energy to take risks, to break out of a sea of sameness. And, in marketing, it's a given that somebody's going to criticize what you do. It could be a peer, it could be another stakeholder, it could be a board member. And, that's why obviously you need metrics, you need data, you need, proof points and evidence to say, hey, this is why it's working and we're moving the needle or not. And so I think you have to stick to your guns. And, I remember I came up with this idea, Emburse it, and just to try to verbify it, just to get people, hey, there's a better way. Don't just expense it, Emburse it. And one of our board advisors said, well, if everybody starts using it, won't you be generic and lose lose value. So I don't think Google's lost any value by Google. So I mean, if we become universal, we'll be $1 billion company. That'll be a nice problem to have. So that was the end of that conversation. So I just stuck to my guns. I mean, I think I'm onto something, and we've done some social media campaigns. So that's just one example. We came up with the spend optimization maturity model, and that's a real differentiator. And a lot of people are like, you can't do that. Well, we have customers that love it now. So sometimes it just takes time, but again, that's courage. Not backing down, taking feedback, of course, and adapting, but sticking to your,
Yeah, no, I love that. But I mean, it sounds like you were fortunate enough to be in an environment where you've been able to do that, right? And I think sometimes you need that C-suite support, don't you, to be courageous? And you do feel for the CMO that can't.
Well, you're exactly right. Look, I've been fortunate in that I've had, sometimes I've had my office next to the CRO that I've always partnered well. Friends with CROs and, and obviously CEOs, those are two of the most critical CFOs. You've got to maintain all these relationships in the C-suite and foster those. And because you're going to need allies. You'll need allies, during budget battles, during board battles. And so I think that having that connection with the C-suite is critical.
Well, it sounds like you go back to your first C, which is culture, right, of doing that. And I think if you've got to implement all these 5 Cs equally, haven't you? Culture, coaching, campaign. Because if you're doing the campaign, the CRO's on your side, category, and have the courage to do those things. And the interesting is when you mentioned courage just then, and it was something I was going to ask you about, it reminds me of Drew Neiser, and he has that cat's nest framework, doesn't he? And the first one of those is courageous, isn't it? Courageous, artful. I can't remember the rest of it, but I've had him on the show, and he talks about that CMOs need to be courageous. And the reason why I want to bring up with you is you're part of CMO huddles that he drives, but also in one of your other blog posts, you mentioned how CMOs shouldn't go it alone. So and I know you're a mentor yourself, how important is it for CMOs to have a mentor?
I think it's critical. I mean, you think about it, I'm an athlete, I still play competitive tennis on the weekends, and got kids doing these things, and having a coach in your corner, it can only help you because it's a lonely job to be a CMO. And who are you going to go to to challenge your ideas, to give you new ideas, to tell you about lessons learned and bridges burned or whatever. And so I find peer groups, I've been a part of them since I was a CMO. I got lucky, I got invited to one long before there were the CMO huddle. It's great guy, and lots of good peers in that group, among others. And so I think coaching in mentors can help you, especially early in your career, because you can't just go to CEOs like, I really don't know what I'm doing. Like, I have no clue on this latest directive. But you can go to your peers and your mentor and say, like, what are some options? And I think it's just don't go it alone is my advice. And have peer groups or coaches or both.
No, I agree. And I'm fortunate enough that I also coach CMO as well. And the thing the reason why I think CMOs should have a coach or a mentor or just somebody to talk to is that last C of yours, which is courage, right? Is I think somebody else who's in the role can help hold you accountable to that, right? Is that, I'm right to hold this course, right? I'm right to fight this battle in the C-suite or make this case or whatever it is. Otherwise, your little goldfish bowl and influencers are the other senior members of the team who have their own agendas, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I need to. I mentioned Drew's cats thing. Then I can't remember the TNS. I should do, but I'll link to all of Drew Neiser's stuff as well in the show notes. So if people are interested, they can go to that. So I'm afraid we're out of time there, Grant. I always enjoy talking to you. One of the things that I'd love to have you back on the show, because you also talk about CMO pitfalls on your blog as well, which I'll encourage people to go and look at, and maybe you can come back and talk about those too, which is the flip side of this, I think.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, no, I'd love to have you back. All right, so thank you very much for that, Grant. I have one final question. Last time, and it's our regular feature, the Rockstar CMO Swimming Pool, where we throw all the bullshit, snake oil, and overhyped trends that plague this industry we love. Last time, we had a great conversation because you chucked in attribution, and I encourage people to go back and listen to that. I really enjoyed that conversation. Are you going to stick with attribution, or do you have another candidate for our pool?
Well, why don't I just get even more controversial? Why not? Why don't we also throw along with attribution marketing lead volumes?
Right.
because I think they're meaningless.
Yeah.
That obviously is controversial. Look, you've got to have leads to ultimately get opportunities and win. But really, I think we've progressed in, at least I feel most of my peers have, in having true, we're in it together. Sales and marketing alignment, right?
Yeah.
We're integrated reporting. We do pipeline quality metrics. Yeah. And we have volumes. The more important thing is, do we have a variety, as I mentioned earlier in the show? Like we have a variety of lead sources, so we're not just relying on, pay per click, right?
Yeah.
And are we looking at, speed, velocity, transition, the percentage that converts, one segment versus another, and the relative value of the opportunities, and ultimately the main metric really should be close one business. I once had somebody in my team say, "Look at all these leads." I said, "Well, what's the status?" "Well, I don't know. I handed them over to sales." It's clearly the wrong answer. And if you deliver a superior customer experience and create customers for life, that you can grow customers in addition to get new ones. So anyway, I just thought, why don't we just throw the MQL into?
I love it. And that's another great conversation about MQLs. And a couple of people actually on the show have questioned the validity of MQLs, should I put it that way? And also a lot of the time when you've set up these frameworks, you actually define behavior, don't you? You start rewarding people on the number of things that they do. And if it's not connected with the whole customer journey, you're not really creating value, are you, with that kind of thing?
You're exactly right.
Yeah, I love it. Anyway, Grant, thank you very much for your time. I know you're incredibly busy with these things. When people want to get in touch with you, spin the dial on the interwebs, where they're going to find you?
Well, I've made it pretty easy. It's so it's if it's LinkedIn, it's Grant E. Johnson 1. If it's Twitter, it's Grant E. Johnson 1. It's Grant E. Johnson 1. I guess I got there first at gmail.com.
Splendid. All right. And also your blog is cmomentor.com, which is a fantastic URL. Before we hit record, I was complimenting you on snagging that. I was surprised that it was available. So cmomentor.com. And I look forward to having you back on the show, and we'll talk about I've almost made you commit on while I'm recording, which is probably a bit naughty of me, but it would be great to talk about the CMO pitfalls next in a couple of weeks on the show, if you'll be available.
Yeah, that would be fun. As always, a pleasure connecting with you, Ian. Have yourself a great weekend, and we'll look forward to connecting later.
And you, Grant. Thank you very much for your time. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Thank you, Grant. I will, of course, include all his links, including to his rather wonderful blog, in the show notes. And if you want to be a better marketer, I highly recommend hanging out with Grant. Right, it's the end of the week. Time to wind down in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar and join my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose, Chief Troublemaker at the Content Advisory. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, is that Ian? It's you. I can hardly hear you and see you. It's so dark in here. Did you bring in a goth heavy metal band from like Finland or something? It's so loud. I know the Finnish really like their goth heavy metal bands, but boy, this one is really hardcore. Maybe we'll just get them to try and turn it down a little bit so we can have our conversation. I don't know what it is with you, the mariachi bands, and then now a goth Northern Europe band.
I'm just making a note of this for when I do the edit. So goth heavy metal band from Finland. Very specific there, but
you'll find plenty of them. Trust me, you'll find many of them. They're easy to find.
But anyway, if those guys can just pipe down a moment.
Yes.
What is it that you are drinking this week?
Well, we have a very special cocktail, a fall cocktail, if you will, and it's this is one of those that you probably aren't. Well, you're definitely not going to have the ingredients for. Let's just be clear. But what else is new? But most people at home won't have this either. But it is a lovely, wonderful cocktail if you want to go actually research it. So I'm calling it the World Traveler because I miss traveling the world. And it's I'm calling it the World Traveler, and it's got a little bit of so it starts with a little bit of what's called Shungju, and that's a Korean rice wine.
Wow.
And it's absolutely delightful. It's a little bit like sake, but it's not. It's definitely. I mean, the Koreans will tell you it's definitely not like sake at all. But it is a rice wine, and lovely, and it's got a little bit more of a fermented taste to it than sake. So it's a little heavier than that. And then combine that with a little bit of vermouth di Torino. It's the Italian sweet vermouth. Which we've had on this show before. We've made with other cocktails. And then a little bit, maybe a tablespoon or so of Amaro Nonino, which is, of course, another Italian liqueur. And add that in there with a little bit of orange bitters, if you have it. And that's kind of it. And if you want, this one wouldn't be over ice. This one would be shaken and chilled and then poured into a martini glass or something like that. And it's just a delightful fall.
Amazing.
It tastes like fall. It's just a wonderful kind of cocktail.
I don't know where you get these things from, Robert. That sounds like an amazing cocktail that I've never heard of. Well, I'll attempt to make it with the ingredients on my desktop bar.
Yeah.
I think you've already, sensed that maybe I don't have any hope here. So I'm going to go for the most Scottish of rice wines, which everybody knows is Hendrick's Lunar Gin.
Yes.
I shall have a little bit of that, and I know you said no ice, but I haven't got my shaker with me, so I'm just going to stick some ice in a glass.
All right.
Pour in some of this nice Hendrick's. Oh, that's quite a good measure. And then the other ingredients from Italy. I'm going for tonic, which isn't Italian.
Yes. And the most British of liqueurs is tonic, I think.
Yes, that's true. Or certainly of things that you put in gin. And I shall have that with and very similar flavours to what you've got there, because the nice people at Fever Tree have put some cucumber in it, so it's very nice. Let me try this cocktail. That is delicious, Robert. What are we calling these?
I've been calling this one the World Traveler because I was reminiscing about my travels in 2019, and I remembered that it was this time of year that I went to Korea and had just an amazing time. I love Korea so much. Spent some time in Seoul, and then of course I spent a little time in Milano, and spent a little time there. And so I was like, I wonder if there's anything that would mix those two cultures into a cocktail, and I came up with this thing.
There you go.
And it's
it's your own invention. It's delicious. Well,
I don't know that it's my own invention. I did find there are when I started looking up the different brands of Shungju, I did find that there are many cocktails out there with it. Some of which mix in bitters, and some of which mix in some other things. But the Italian liqueur part, I think, was a little different.
So we'll look out for those. So where would we have this great blend of Korea and Italy in a glass?
I think we have to go to Seoul. I don't know if you've ever been.
Never, no.
But it is an absolutely amazing, thriving, very alive city. And, it's a little bit like Los Angeles in the sense that it's so spread out. And so it's, you forget how big it really is until you sort of fly in. And it's just giant. But there are some, amazing parts of the city where you can sit. There's this one spot, there's a restaurant that sits on top of this hill that overlooks the city. And it's just an absolutely spectacular view of the entire, not the entire city because it's spread out so much, but a good portion of the city. And you see the river, and it's just, it's unbelievable. I very much like Seoul.
Wow. It's funny because you making the comparison with LA, because the last time I went to LA, which is quite a few years ago, I was taken to a restaurant that sat on top of a hill that I could see over LA. So it was like, very similar experience.
It is. But here's the difference. When you're flying over Seoul, when you fly over LA, you sort of see the downtown area, and then you see the spread out of neighborhoods, right? You see houses and commercial buildings and all that sort of thing. When you fly over Seoul, it's like it's the big. I mean, other than Tokyo, which I've also flown over and has a similar kind of vibe. It's like downtown stretches to the horizon, right? It's just skyscrapers after skyscrapers after skyscrapers. It's just all this shit just so big and sprawling, but it's all big buildings. It's all like giant downtown. It's amazing.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, my daughters were quite fascinated. One of them in particular with Korea, and was learning Korean and planning to go one day. So it sounds fascinating. I hope she gets to do that ambition. So we're in Korea. We're overlooking Seoul. What are we going to be talking about over these wonderful World Traveller drinks?
Oh, well. So I think we're going to talk about a little bit about Hollywood, actually, interestingly enough. One of the things that seems to come up a lot when I talk to content marketing teams in particular is, the number one question, it seems these days, is what should we talk about? Which I think is very interesting. Because there's this very interesting challenge to set a foundational idea. And so it feels like ideas are hard to come by around what the content marketing team will talk about. And here's the way a typical meeting will go, right? So, the content marketing team gets a meeting together, and they'll get a meeting together with the brand team, the product team, PR, and they'll come together because they want, they got their notebooks ready, they got their pens ready, and they say, great, let's have an ideation or a brainstorming meeting about what content marketing should talk about. And so somebody from the demand gen team stands up and goes, I know what we'll do. We'll create a list of all the questions that buyers might have about our particular approach. And then the product marketing person stands up and goes, love that idea. That's great. We could create articles answering all those questions. And then let's sprinkle in a little bit about how our products solve all those challenges. And then the brand marketing manager goes, okay, I like that, but how about this idea? Why don't we write some posts about our new brand mission and how our products and services are really like helping solve climate change? And then the product marketing manager goes, great, that's fantastic. Then we could sprinkle in a little bit about how our products solve that problem, right? And then someone from PR goes, wait a minute, I like all those ideas, but I have an idea. Let's write posts that feature profiles of our executives and all of the thought leadership they're bringing to the market. And the brand marketing manager goes, great, that's a fantastic idea. And the product marketing manager goes, I love it. And then the executives could talk a little bit more about our product and how they solve challenges. And so everybody goes, that was fantastic. The pizza arrives to the meeting. Everybody stands up. And the content marketing people are sitting there with exactly 0 notes in their notebook. And the brand marketing manager turns with a big pizza in his mouth and goes, I don't know what you guys were so worried about. We got tons of things to talk about. It's like, no, we got to find a bigger story. We have to find something that's more interesting than any of those things if we really want to do things. And I have found that there's a process that showrunners for TV series, and what a showrunner is someone who sort of is the leader of the team of a TV show, right? So, in movies business, it might be called the producer. But in the TV business, it's typically called a showrunner, someone who is basically responsible for the vision, organization, and sort of management of the entire show. And so these showrunners have an actual process here in Hollywood because they have a similar challenge, right, to content marketing teams, right? They've got directors and actors and production specialists and all these things that have to get aligned on how they're going to produce all these episodes. The process is basically plan it out, and they'll sit in a room with their team and they'll plan out the entire season or multiple seasons in some cases of a TV series, talking through each episode, where the arcs are, what the characters are going to be, what the settings are going to be, all those kinds of things, so that they plan out all the episodes. Then the second step is, once they have that, they create outlines for all of those episodes. And the reason they create those detailed outlines is to be able to communicate to the production specialists, to the directors, to the casting directors, when they're going to need actors, when they're going to need on location places, when they're going to need special cameras, all those kinds of things to be able to outline that thing. And then, and we talked a little bit about this last week, they create the content, not the packages. In other words, what they do then is they set that team off and they go, go write the entire season of content, and they'll write the entire, scripts of all these things, but they don't go produce them all yet. They go write the entire, so that they can make changes to episode 1 because of what happens in episode 3, or they can make changes in episode 9 because of what happened in episode 4. And they get all that stuff aligned and all of the scripts written before they actually start feeding it into the production crew to start creating it over time. And taking the time to do those 3 steps, or at least 2 of those 3 steps, can be a huge benefit to you as a content marketing team. Because now when that, hey, let's just sprinkle in a little bit of product information comes up, you're going, no, the story doesn't call for that right now. This is what we're working on. This is what we have planned. And it's just more efficient for all the parties involved. So it's a great way to sort of think about how to plan out your content rather than sort of just suffering from, well, who else has an idea about what we should talk about?
Yeah. So who would be the showrunner then in a content? I mean, last week we were talking about stakeholders and we were talking about the way that the content team tends to be a production house. We're saying here is that we're going to drive the story. How do you make that happen within your clients?
Yeah, it's here's the thing. It is this is only applicable, really. I mean, I'd like to think that this is applicable beyond a content team that that doesn't own some level of a channel. In other words, most of the time what I find is that there is a content. One of the things that the content team is responsible for is the blog or the resource center or the webinar program, or maybe all of those things, right? And what we're really trying to figure out is what the larger story is across multiple channels. And so that's where it goes beyond sort of thinking about it from what are we doing? Are we writing blog posts? Are we writing white papers, etc.? What I want to be able to do is to say, here is the bigger, broader, foundational story we want to tell over the next 9 months. Episode 1 is going to be a blog post. Episode 2 is going to be a webinar, a white paper, and a blog post. Episode 3 is going to, and so on and so forth. So that when you're putting forward your calendar, what you're putting forward is, yes, elements that will ultimately be containers or digital assets, if you will, but it is a calendar of production and a calendar of content, right? We're going to write all this content and it's going to be done in March, but these are for digital assets that we're not going to use until June, July, August, September, etc. That's the general idea. Is if we can start planning that far out, well, it gives us so much more time to create bigger, more meaningful pieces and account for all the reactive pieces that we have to do, right? Where all those things that we're marketing goes, oh my God, hair on fire, we've got to write this post, or we've got to write this article, or we need to write this social post, or whatever it is. Because we've got the foundational story planned out, it gives us a lot more bandwidth to be able to handle the reactive sort of triage stuff that we have to take care of.
Also, I think if everybody agrees on what the story is and what the main points are you want to get out of that story, you can point at that as the framework. And if somebody's got some other idea, at least you've got a point of discussion, haven't you? To say, I'm not sure that supports our content story, our content mission.
There's a standard. Really good. There's a standard. And you can't improve on a standard if there isn't a standard. Exactly.
And also, you can't say, I mean, it might be you say yes and we will do it, but at least you've had that conversation and everybody's aware that this is a distraction from your content strategy, right? So yes, very good. So we all need a showrunner. I love that. And then and you're based in Hollywood. Any writing that happens in Hollywood that you can recommend? These are getting more tenuous.
No.
A website, perhaps?
Yeah. No.
There's none. All right, how about yours? Where would people find your website?
They'll find us hanging around this little place called contentadvisory.net, where we service all of our wonderful clients.
I love it. All right. And when people spin the dial on Inverse, where are they going to find you?
Well, they'll find me on Twitter these days. They'll find me on LinkedIn these days. And also there's our little community. If you're in the world of customer experience, come check us out at experienceadvisors.io. It's a fun little community that we've got going on now, where we've got a little newsletter. We've got a great community talking about all these kinds of topics on a daily basis in our little Discord community. It's turning out to be really interesting and fun.
Yes, it is. And I always include a link to it in the show notes, so that's where folks can find it, as well as your links. And and more importantly for me, will I find you in the bar next week?
You will indeed. Hopefully with no Finnish goth bands around.
God knows what you'll come up with next week. But all right, I'll see you then. Thank you, Robert. And at the beginning there, you heard a little bit of Finland's Lordi and Hard Rock Hallelujah. That actually won the Eurovision Song Contest in 2006. That's a wrap on episode 135 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks to Jeff, Grant and Robert for sharing their insight. Please say hello to them. I'll include all their links in the show notes, which you can find on your favourite podcast app, or at rockstarcmo.com, where you can also find all our previous episodes. Most of all, thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. So, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? Please let us know on the socials, or drop a rating or review in your favourite podcast app, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, I learn all about DAOs and Web3 from Don Richmond, co-founder of Filmio. Jeff will be back in the studio, and Robert will be back in the bar. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you'll again join us next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.